A single dad made a harmless joke. Move in with me. He never expected a billionaire CEO to take him seriously the next morning, suitcase in hand, ready to rewrite his life.
Michael Cole wasn't expecting his entire day to shift the moment a black luxury sedan limped into his garage like it had survived a war. He had been standing under a half-fixed pickup, hands greasy, mind focused on how he'd stretch his paycheck to cover Mary's school supplies, when he heard the uneven sputter of an engine that was clearly in pain. He stepped out and wiped his hands, ready to greet a customer like any other, until the driver's door opened. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been carved straight out of a magazine cover. Tall, sharp features softened by exhaustion, long dark hair pulled into an elegant twist that had started collapsing from stress, and heels that didn't belong anywhere near his oil-stained concrete floor. She slipped off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that flickered between irritation, fatigue, and something that surprised him, vulnerability. "Tell me you can fix this," she said, not with entitlement, but with the tone of someone barely holding herself together. Michael only nodded because he sensed she wasn't in the mood for small talk and focused on the car. Under the hood, he found a mess, an overheated engine caused by a clogged coolant line, the kind of issue that happens when someone is too busy to notice the warning lights. He explained as much, expecting her to roll her eyes or brush it off. Instead, she let out a small, embarrassed laugh. "Figures. I haven't had a free minute in weeks." He glanced at her again, studying the way she massaged her temples, shoulders tense like she was carrying the weight of a collapsing world. "Rough day?" he asked gently. She gave him a look that suggested the question was laughably small compared to her problems. "Rough year," she corrected. When she finally introduced herself, Jennifer Langford, he froze internally. The Jennifer Langford, CEO of Langford Dynamics, the empire everyone admired, envied, or cheered. He had seen her face on business articles, financial magazines, and stock market charts. And now she was standing in his tiny garage asking him to save her day. Michael tried to treat her like any other customer, but it was impossible not to notice the contrast between her corporate polish and his laid-back world. Still, she didn't act like a billionaire. She didn't boss him around or demand a rush job. She simply stood beside him, arms folded, watching him work with surprising patience. At one point, she joked, "You must think I'm clueless. I barely know what half the buttons in my car do." Michael chuckled. "Trust me, you're not alone, though checking the coolant would have saved you a headache." She gasped in mock offense. "Are you lecturing a CEO?" He shrugged. "Only when they deserve it." Her laugh this time was real, not the polite corporate version she probably had to use every day. Mary burst into the garage before Jennifer could respond, holding a chocolate chip cookie and her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, I made cookies," she announced proudly, then paused when she saw Jennifer. Kids don't hide curiosity, and Mary stared up with wide eyes. "You're really pretty," she said bluntly. Jennifer blinked, startled, then smiled with a softness Michael hadn't seen from her yet. "Thank you. You're really cute." Mary's face lit up, and she immediately grabbed Jennifer's hand like they'd been friends forever. "Do you want a cookie? Daddy says they're a little burnt, but I think they're perfect." Jennifer hesitated for only a moment before nodding and letting Mary pull her toward the small kitchenette in the office. Michael watched them disappear together, feeling something unfamiliar settle in his chest. By the time he finished fixing the car, Jennifer and Mary were sitting at the tiny table, eating cookies like old friends. Jennifer looked strangely at ease in his tiny little world, sitting there in her expensive clothes surrounded by drawings, tools, and mismatched furniture. When Michael walked in, she looked up with a peaceful expression he hadn't expected. "Your daughter convinced me to try 2 cookies, maybe 3. Mary nodded vigorously. "She likes them." Michael wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "Only because she doesn't know the danger she's in." Jennifer smiled wider, and the tension in her face seemed to melt. Michael asked if she needed to get anywhere important, and she hesitated before saying, "Honestly, no. My schedule is chaos, but none of it feels important today." The honesty surprised him. They ended up talking. Really talking, not about her company or her money, but about everyday things. The weather, childhood memories, pets they used to have, movies Mary insisted they watch. Jennifer told them she hadn't had a normal conversation in months. "Everyone either wants something from me or wants to impress me. This feels different." Michael didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded, feeling unexpectedly protective of the small moment they were sharing. As the sun began to set, Jennifer glanced around the tiny kitchen again, and there was a look in her eyes he couldn't quite interpret. Something longing, something tired, something sad. So, trying to lighten the mood, he said jokingly, "If life ever gets too much, you can move in with us." Jennifer stared at him, not offended, not confused, but surprised. Then she gave a tiny, fleeting smile, the kind that hides a deeper ache. "Careful," she whispered. "I might take you up from that." It was meant to be playful, but there was a truth in her voice I couldn't ignore. She thanked him for the help, hugged Mary goodbye, and drove off with one last grateful look. After she left, the house felt a little quieter, a little emptier, though he couldn't understand why. Michael didn't think much of his joke. He didn't expect it to stick in her mind. He certainly didn't expect her to show up the next morning. But life, he would soon learn, has a way of taking harmless words and turning them into the beginning of everything.
Michael Cole woke up the next morning expecting a normal start to his chaotic routine, the kind where he burned the toast, misplaced his keys, and tried to convince his daughter that wearing mismatched socks was not a fashion statement. Mary was already bouncing around the house looking for the shoe she somehow always lost, and Michael was juggling a cup of lukewarm coffee while reminding her to brush her teeth. The morning felt like any other, loud and messy, until a firm knock echoed through the hallway. It was sharp and deliberate, not the neighbor's light tap or the postman's usual double knock. Michael frowned, set down his coffee, and opened the door, and time froze. Standing on his front step was Jennifer Langford, dressed nothing like the billion-dollar CEO the world knew. Her designer suit had been replaced by faded jeans, a plain sweatshirt, and sneakers that looked borrowed. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she wore no makeup, which made her look startlingly human and deeply tired. In her hand was a suitcase, a real, full suitcase. She cleared her throat and pushed her sunglasses up into her hair. "Is your offer still good?" she asked softly. Michael stared at her like the universe had suddenly shifted under his feet. For a second, he actually looked behind him, half expecting she was talking to someone else. "My offer?" he repeated. Jennifer gave a small, embarrassed nod. "Last night, you said if life gets too heavy, I could move in." She let out a breath that trembled slightly. "I know you were joking, but I didn't know where else to go. It hit him then. This wasn't a glamorous woman playing a dramatic game. She meant it, completely, absolutely." Jennifer Langford, who could buy half the town without blinking, was standing on his doorstep hoping he wouldn't turn her away. Michael rubbed the back of his neck, trying to make sense of the moment, but he could see something in her eyes he couldn't ignore. Desperation mixed with shame, mixed with a flicker of hope. Before he could say anything, Mary ran up behind him wearing one shoe and clutching her stuffed rabbit. She gasped when she saw Jennifer. "You came back," she squealed, wrapping her arms around Jennifer's legs as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Jennifer crouched down, suitcase thumping beside her, and hugged the little girl like she was holding on to something safe. "I did. I really did." That small interaction pulled Michael's heart in two different directions. One part softening, the other panicking. He didn't want to make Jennifer feel unwanted, but this was huge, life-changing huge. He cleared his throat. "Jennifer, why don't you come inside? You look like you could use, I don't know, coffee? A seat?" She stepped inside slowly, as if afraid who might change his mind. Michael led her to the small kitchen where toast crumbs still sprinkled the counter, and he suddenly wished the place wasn't such a mess. Jennifer, however, didn't seem to care. She sat down, folded her hands on the table, and let out a long exhale that sounded like she'd be holding it in for years. Michael finally broke the silence. "Are you running from something? Or someone?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Both. My board is devouring me. The media won't give me space to breathe. Every move I make sparks a new rumor, a new headline, a new problem. I haven't slept more than a few hours in days. I can't think. I can't even exist without someone watching." She rubbed her forehead. "So, when you joked about staying here, it was the first time in a long time it sounded even remotely like peace." Michael wasn't sure what to say. His house was small, noisy, and cluttered, the opposite of peace, and yet she was looking at it like it was a sanctuary. Mary climbed onto Jennifer's lap and announced, "You can have my room."
Michael immediately intervened. "No, she cannot have your room. She's a guest." But Jennifer shook her head, smiling for the first time that morning. "A couch is fine, or the floor, honestly. I need somewhere no one expects anything from me for a minute." He hesitated. His instincts warned him that letting a billionaire CEO move into his home could complicate his quiet world more than he could handle. But then he looked at Jennifer again. Really looked at her. She wasn't powerful or polished in that moment. She was exhausted, scared, and trying her best not to fall apart in front of them. He couldn't turn her away. "All right," he finally said. "You can stay. Just for a little while, until you figure things out." Jennifer's shoulders sagged with relief, and she nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you," she whispered, as if the simple kindness meant more than any corporate loyalty she ever received. Mary, thrilled, jumped up and shouted, "Yay, we have a house friend," before running off to find her socks. Michael helped Jennifer bring her suitcase to the living room, and she looked around at the mismatched furniture and crooked picture frames with an expression he didn't expect. Fondness. "Your home feels real," she said quietly. "Mine doesn't." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just shrugged and told her she could use the shower if she wanted. She thanked him again and disappeared down the hall. When he heard the water turn on, he leaned against the wall and tried to process the last 10 minutes. His life, once predictable and simple, had just taken a sharp turn he never could have forecasted. A billionaire CEO was now living under his roof, not because she needed luxury, not because she needed help with work, but because she needed something he never expected anyone to ask from him: safety, space, a quiet corner of the world. He looked toward the hallway where her suitcase sat, then toward Mary, who was dancing around the kitchen, happy as if this was perfectly normal. For the first time in a long time, Michael felt a strange mix of nerves and warmth settling inside him. He didn't know what this would become or how long Jennifer truly planned to stay. All he knew was that the joke he made yesterday had just become his new reality, and it felt like the beginning of something he wasn't ready for, but couldn't bring himself to push away.
Jennifer woke up on Michael's living room couch with a feeling she didn't recognize at first. It wasn't stress or dread or the mental checklist of meetings she had to survive. It was stillness, a foreign, gentle kind of quiet. Light filtered through the curtains in soft streaks. Your warmth sink in. No buzzing phone, no urgent messages, no assistants knocking on her door. Just the hum of a normal life she had only ever seen from a distance. When she finally stood up and walked into the kitchen, Mary spotted her first. "Good morning," the little girl shouted, waving a dripping pancake like a greeting flag. Michael, flipping another batch on the stove, looked over his shoulder with a simple, genuine smile. "Sleep okay?" She nodded, feeling unexpectedly safe in his casual tone. "Better than I have in days." Michael slid a plate toward her, and Jennifer sat down at the tiny table, feeling strangely exposed without the layers of her usual armor. No makeup, no carefully curated outfit, no corporate tone. Just herself. She took a bite of the pancake and nearly choked. "This is burnt," she said, trying not to laugh. Michael smirked. "I never said they'd be good. I just said I'd make them." Mary leaned over and whispered loudly, "I cook better than Daddy," making Jennifer laugh for the first time that morning. It wasn't the practice laugh she gave journalists or investors. It was real, warm, free. After breakfast, Jennifer insisted on helping with dishes, even though Michael protested that she was a guest. She grabbed a towel anyway. "If I stay here, I'm not hiding in the corner while you do everything." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue again. She washed, he dried. Mary played with her stuffed rabbit on the counter. It was chaotic, unpolished, and nothing like the pristine stainless steel kitchen she had back in her penthouse. But something about it made her chest loosen. Later, while Michael left for the garage to handle a few repairs, Jennifer stayed behind with Mary. Having no experience with children, she braced herself for disaster. But Mary seemed happy just telling stories, drawing pictures, and asking hundreds of curious questions about Jennifer's life. Do you own all the buildings? Do you have robot servants? Do rich people sleep in beds made of money? Jennifer tried not to laugh as she answered each one. No buildings, no robots, and no money beds, just a lot of work.
Mary frowned thoughtfully. That sounds boring. She blinked. No one had ever summarized her life so bluntly. Yeah, she admitted slowly. Sometimes it really is. When lunchtime neared, Jennifer attempted to cook something simple, grilled cheese. It went horribly wrong. The bread burned on one side, melted cheese oozed onto the pan, and smoke began to rise. Panicking, she grabbed a spatula and attempted to save the last sandwich, dropping it on the floor in the process. Mary clapped like she was watching a comedy show. "You cook worse than Daddy!" Jennifer covered her face, laughing and mortified. "This is why I have a private chef." "Well," Mary said proudly, handing her a juice box, "you're good at other things, like not yelling." By the time Michael returned, the kitchen smelled like a battlefield of burnt bread and melted cheese. He stopped in the doorway, took one look at the disaster, and deadpanned, "Should I call the fire department?" Jennifer threw a dish towel at him, cheeks flushed. "It was an experiment." He raised a brow. "What were you trying to discover? The fastest way to ruin lunch?" They both laughed, and for a moment, the air between them felt light and strangely comfortable. In the afternoon, Michael invited Jennifer to the garage, saying he could use a second pair of hands. She agreed, curious about his world. She arrived to find him bent over the hood of a truck, sweat on his forehead, sleeves rolled up, moving with a calm focus she envied. He handed her a tool. "Hold this." She stared at it like it was a foreign object. "What do I do with it?" "Just keep it pointed away from your face," he said dryly. She swatted his arm. "I'm not helpless." He grinned. "We'll see." Working beside him was messy and awkward, and she made more mistakes than she cared to admit, but his patience never snapped. He corrected her gently, laughed with her when she dropped a tool, and didn't once make her feel foolish for not knowing anything about engines. In her world, admitting ignorance was a weakness. Here, it just made her human. As the sun lowered, they sat outside the garage, sipping cheap iced tea from a corner store. Jennifer stared at the sky, streaked orange and pink behind the rooftops. "I forgot sunsets looked like this," she murmured. Michael nodded, without looking at her. "They're free. You don't need $1 million view." She smiled, feeling something warm bloom inside her, something she didn't want to name yet. Back at the house, after dinner and bedtime stories, Jennifer lingered in the living room while Michael tucked Mary in. She wandered through the small hallway, noticing family photos, Michael holding newborn Mary, Michael changing her tire swing, Mary wearing a dinosaur costume while he laughed behind her. It was a world built from small, imperfect moments, not grand achievements or press conferences. When Michael returned, he found her looking at a picture of him holding baby Mary against his chest. "You were young," she said softly. "You still are," he replied. Jennifer turned toward him with a look that made his breath catch. Open, quiet, almost fragile. "I don't know when I started missing this kind of life. Maybe I never had it in the first place." Michael stepped closer, hands in his pockets, voice gentle. "Then maybe it's not too late to learn." She swallowed, unable to answer. She felt exposed in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. But for once, it didn't scare her. Instead, it felt like she was finally stepping into her own life instead of running from it. Later that night, after Michael went to bed, she curled up on the couch under a warm blanket. She stared at the quiet ceiling, letting the softness of the room settle around her. She didn't know how long she'd stay, or what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in forever, she didn't feel alone. She felt like a person again, someone real, someone alive. And she knew deep down that she wasn't just resting here, she was changing here.
Jennifer had been living with Michael and Mary for almost a week when the fragile piece she'd found began to crack. At first, life felt almost unreal in its simplicity. She woke to the smell of coffee instead of urgent emails, helped Mary with school projects instead of battling corporate deadlines, and spent afternoons laughing with Michael at the garage while he patiently taught her how not to drop a wrench every 5 minutes. She found herself settling into their routine without meaning to, helping with dinner, wiping down counters, listening to Mary's stories, and talking with Michael late into the night until both of them forgot what time it was. But the world she'd left behind wasn't used to being ignored. It started with a single news headline that popped up on Michael's old radio in the garage while he worked under a car. Billionaire Jennifer Langford missing. Board releases statement. The moment her name drifted through the static-filled air, Michael slid out from under the car and stared at the radio like it had spoken directly to him. Jennifer froze where she stood, holding a tool she didn't know how to use, her heart hammering as the announcer continued. Langford Dynamics has not been able to establish contact with their CEO for 72 hours. Sources claim she left her penthouse abruptly. Investors worry about the company's stability. Michael turned off the radio immediately, but it was too late. The calm bubble surrounding them had burst. That afternoon, Jennifer paced the living room with her arms wrapped around herself, trying to quiet the rush of panic rising in her chest. "I didn't think they'd go this far," she whispered. "All I did was disappear for a few days. People take vacations all the time." Michael watched her carefully, leaning against the doorway with a softness that didn't match the seriousness in his eyes. "Not people like you," he said gently. "Your world doesn't let you be human." She looked up at him, hurt flickering across her expression. "Is it so wrong to want to breathe?" He stepped closer. "No, but you knew they'd notice eventually." Her lips trembled as she exhaled. "I just hoped eventually wouldn't be now." Things escalated quickly after that. The next morning, a black SUV rolled slowly past the house. Not unusual for the neighborhood, but Jennifer felt it like a punch. She pulled the curtain back slightly and saw a man inside holding a camera with a long lens. Paparazzi. Her heart sank. "They found me," she whispered. Michael's jaw tightened, but he tried to stay calm. "Maybe it's nothing." But she knew better. Cameras didn't show up in small towns on accident. Somehow, somewhere, someone had seen her. Barely an hour later, the first online article appeared. Jennifer Langford spotted in small town. Where is the missing CEO? The grainy photo showed her walking out of a grocery store with a bag of flour and cereal. Jennifer stared at the screen in horror. "I thought no one recognized me," she whispered. Michael looked at the photo and sighed. "Jennifer, you're one of the most recognizable people in the state." She pressed her hands to her forehead. "This is bad, so bad. My board will think I'm irresponsible. My investors will panic even more. They'll think I'm unstable or reckless." Her voice cracked. "I just wanted 1 week to breathe, 1 week to be normal." By midday, 2 more SUVs drove past the garage while Michael worked. Journalists pretended to be customers, asking suspicious questions. Some stood outside the shop pretending to check their phones while clearly waiting for her to appear. Michael grew increasingly frustrated as his day was interrupted again and again. At one point, a reporter asked if he was romantically involved with the hidden CEO, and Michael slammed the garage door so hard the reporter jumped back. Jennifer watched from the house window, guilt crushing her. She hadn't meant to drag Michael into her chaos. That evening, Michael found her sitting on the back steps alone, knees pulled to her chest, her face hidden in her hands. He sat beside her silently. After a moment, she spoke through a shaky breath. "I should leave. I'm hurting your business, your reputation, your peace." Michael shook his head. "You're not hurting me." She turned her face toward him, eyes red. "The paparazzi parked outside your garage today. You think people want to bring their cars in when cameras are waiting to twist a story around them? You think Mary will be comfortable with strangers hovering around? I didn't mean to bring this into your life." He looked at her gently. "I knew there might be complications, but I don't regret letting you stay." Her voice broke as she whispered, "I do, because I didn't think about how this could hurt you." Michael lowered his voice. "Jennifer, you deserve somewhere you can breathe. And if that's here, then I'm not asking you to go." She shook her head again, quieter this time. "Maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I should have stayed in the world I built, even if it's suffocating." He reached out and touched her hand lightly. "Everyone deserves peace." A long silence followed. The air between them felt heavy but honest. Jennifer finally looked up at him, her expression softening in a way that made his chest tighten. "You're making this harder," she whispered, with a quiet smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Because I don't want to go." Michael swallowed. "Then stay." "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "Not when the world is already circling like vultures."
The moment stretched, raw and unspoken. And then, without another word, Jennifer stood and walked inside. Later that night, she lay awake on the couch staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint murmur of Michael's footsteps in the hallway. She felt more at home here than she ever had in her penthouse, but that was precisely why she knew she couldn't stay. Jennifer woke before sunrise, the house still wrapped in the kind of quiet she wished she could hold on to forever. For a moment, she lay still on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the chaos of yesterday in her mind. The headlines, the cameras, the SUVs, the reporters staking out Michael's garage like bears waiting for a scent. She had known it was only a matter of time before the world crashed into our sanctuary, but she had hoped, foolishly, that she'd get at least a few more days. When she rolled onto her side, she saw her suitcase standing upright near the hallway. She had packed it late the previous night while Michael slept. She didn't want Mary to see. And she didn't want Michael to try to talk her out of anything when she hadn't even convinced herself she was doing the right thing. She stood up quietly, took a breath that hurt, and prepared to walk away from the only place she'd felt human in years. But when she opened the front door to step outside, Michael was already standing on the porch, arms crossed, as if he'd been waiting all night. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, his gaze steady and unreadable. Jennifer swallowed hard. "Michael, I didn't want to wake you." His jaw tightened. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye?" She felt her chest twist. "I was trying to make it easier." "For who?" he asked. She dropped her eyes, unable to answer. Michael stepped aside so she'd at least have space to walk past him, but the movement felt final in a way that made her knees weak. "Your world found you," he said quietly. "I get it, but you don't have to run like you did something wrong." Jennifer's voice cracked. "I didn't run because I did something wrong. I ran because I needed to breathe, and I stayed because I found something I didn't know I was missing." She looked at him helplessly. "But I can't stay now. Not when reporters are outside your shop. Not when Mary could be photographed walking to school. Not when your entire life is being dragged into mine." Michael's expression softened. "You think I care about reporters?" "I think you care about your daughter," she whispered, "and she deserves a normal childhood, not one where cameras follow her because I'm on your porch." He took a slow breath. "You're not a burden." She shook her head, tears forming. "Yes, I am, even if you won't say it." A silence stretched between them, long and heavy. Michael finally exhaled and stepped back into the house, leaving the door open behind him. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't rejection either. It was something in between. Later that morning, Jennifer met with her board through a private video call from Michael's living room. Everyone looked furious, frantic, or disappointed, some all three at once. They demanded explanations, updates, reassurances. One board member even asked if she had suffered a breakdown. Jennifer bit back her anger and kept her voice steady as she addressed them. "I stepped away because I needed clarity, not because I'm unstable." Another responded sharply, "Well, the market thinks otherwise." Worse, when they mentioned shareholders panicking and investors withdrawing, Jennifer felt her stomach twist. She hated that her absence had caused so much chaos, but she hated even more that the company believed they owned her life. When the meeting ended, she felt drained and hollow. The board insisted she return to the city immediately, and she knew they wouldn't stop until she did. She found Michael outside fixing a client's car, trying to salvage the day after yesterday's disruptions. She approached him slowly, each step heavier than the last. He didn't look up when she first spoke. "I have to go back," she said quietly. He paused what he was doing, then straightened and faced her. His eyes held something that stung, understanding mixed with something that looked disturbingly like acceptance. "I figured." She swallowed hard. "They need me to stabilize things. The markets are reacting. Investors are threatening to pull funding." Michael nodded. "That's your world." The simplicity of his words hurt more than anger would have. "I promise I'll come back," Jennifer said, voice shaky. "I want to. She stopped herself. She wasn't ready to name the feelings growing between them, but they pulsed in the air like something alive. Mary came running out of the house then, waving a drawing in her hand. When she saw Jennifer with her suitcase, her smile faltered. "You're leaving?" The tremble in Mary's voice nearly broke her. Jennifer kneeled down and pulled her close. "Just for a little while. I have to fix something at work, but I'm coming back." Mary's small hands tightened around her neck. "Promise?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "I promise." But even as she said it, she felt Michael's eyes on her, and something heavy settled in her chest. Promises meant nothing in her world if circumstances changed. That evening, after Jennifer left for the city, the house felt unbearably quiet. Michael made dinner in silence. Mary picked at her food, eyes downcast. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "She's not coming back, is she?" Michael paused, his fork still in his hand. "She said she would." Mary shook her head. "People always say that." Her words cut deeper than she knew. Days passed, reporters eventually drifted away. The garage returned to normal, but Michael didn't. He went through the motions, but the small routines he'd grown used to, with Jennifer at his kitchen table or laughing at his clumsy cooking, felt empty without her. He didn't admit it aloud, but he missed her, more than he thought he had any right to. He checked the news more often than usual, telling himself it was just curiosity. But when an article circulated online showing Jennifer at a corporate dinner beside a powerful investor rumored to be interested in her, Michael felt something twist inside him. The headline read, "Langford CEO seen close with potential business partner." The comment section tore her apart and paired her with the man in every rumor imaginable. Michael closed the article, jaw clenched. He told himself he didn't care. He told himself her life was separate from his. He told himself she had simply returned to her world. But that night, lying awake staring at the ceiling, he realized the truth he didn't want to name. He didn't just miss Jennifer. He felt replaced by the world she belonged to, and he wasn't sure she would ever walk back into his.
Jennifer spent her first days back in the city feeling like she had stepped into a life that no longer fit. The meetings, the endless phone calls, the flashes of cameras, the board members lecturing her about professionalism. Everything felt louder, colder, sharper than she remembered. Her penthouse, pristine and silent, felt like a museum of her own loneliness. She tried to slip back into the rhythm she'd lived for years, but something had unraveled the moment she stepped out of Michael's house. She couldn't drink her morning coffee without imagining him leaning against the counter, teasing her about her pancake-burning disaster. She couldn't walk into her office without feeling how distant the place was from the warmth of Mary's drawings taped to the refrigerator. Every room she entered seemed too big, too perfect, too empty. And while she pressed forward through meetings and media appearances, her mind kept drifting back to the little house she'd left behind. She tried to push through the growing ache in her chest, but it only worsened when she saw the article swirling online. The rumor about her and the investor she'd stood next to at a public dinner spread faster than she could keep up with. Headlines questioned whether she had run away to see him. Comment sections tore apart her character. Michael must have seen it. The thought made her stomach twist. He'd already believed she belonged to the world she fled from, and now she'd given him one more reason to think she never meant her promise to return. 2 more days passed before everything snapped. During a tense press conference meant to stabilize the company's stock, a reporter asked loudly, "Miss Langford, was your disappearance related to a romantic involvement with Michael Cole, the mechanic from your hometown?" Cameras flashed, and the room erupted into whispers. Jennifer's heart stopped. She looked straight into the sea of reporters and saw dozens of eyes waiting, no, salivating for a scandal. She felt something harden inside her, something she didn't know she still had the strength to feel, the need to reclaim her life from the image everyone else forced on her. She stepped forward to the microphone, her voice steady, but carrying an emotion she hadn't let the world hear in years. "No," she said, "I wasn't running from a romance. I was running from a life that stopped feeling like my own. I disappeared because I needed to breathe. I needed to remember I was human." Reporters murmured, but she continued before they could interrupt. "I have spent years tied to roles and expectations that consumed every hour of my life. That ends today." A stunned silence filled the room. Her board watched her like they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Investors froze, but Jennifer wasn't done. Effective immediately, she said with a calmness she didn't fully feel, "I am stepping down from the aspects of my position that prevent me from having a life outside this company. I will remain involved in a strategic capacity, but I will no longer allow my identity to be defined solely by the title of CEO." Gasps echoed across the room. She didn't care. For once, she felt like she was speaking for herself rather than being a mouthpiece for an empire. I am choosing my life, she finished quietly, not the one the world expects me to have, the one I want. The moment the conference ended, she walked away from the cameras, away from the board, away from the building entirely. She didn't even return to her penthouse. She grabbed a small suitcase she kept in her office closet, flagged down a driver, and headed straight out of the city. Her pulse raced the entire trip. She didn't know if Michael would open the door. She didn't know if he still believed in her promise. She didn't know if she was too late. But she had made her choice, and she was not turning back. When she arrived at Michael's garage, she stepped out of the car to find him locking up for the evening. He was in his grease-stained shirt, exhaustion lingering in the lines around his eyes, but when he saw her standing there with his suitcase in hand, he froze as if the world had stopped spinning. She felt her throat tighten. "Hi," she said softly. He didn't move, didn't blink. She took a tentative step closer. "I'm not here for a break this time. I'm not hiding. I'm not running. I'm not escaping anything." She took another step. "I'm here because I want to be, because I realized something while I was gone." Michael still didn't speak, his eyes searching hers like he wasn't sure this moment was real. Jennifer swallowed and forced the words out. "I didn't go back to choose that world. I went back to close the door on it, because the only place that felt like home was here." She lifted the suitcase slightly. "If you'll still have me." The silence between them stretched until it almost hurt, and then Michael stepped forward, closing the distance in 3 quick strides. He didn't wait for her to finish. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tighter than he ever had before, as if making sure she wouldn't disappear again. She buried her face against his chest, feeling his breath tremble with relief. Before either of them could speak, Mary burst out the side door, rubbing her eyes as if she'd just woken up from a nap. When she saw Jennifer, she froze for a heartbeat before sprinting forward and throwing herself around Jennifer's waist. "You came back," she yelled, clinging to her. Jennifer dropped to her knees and hugged her tightly. "I promised, didn't I?" Mary nodded enthusiastically. "You kept your promise." Michael crouched beside them, one hand on Jennifer's back, the other brushing her hair aside. He looked at Jennifer with an expression she hadn't seen before, something full, warm, certain. "You don't have to go anywhere else," he said quietly. That simple sentence hit her harder than any speech, any contract, any applause she'd ever received. They walked into the house together, Jennifer, Michael, and Mary, closing the door behind them on the chaos of the outside world. Inside, the house felt alive again. It smelled like dinner and warmth and the soft comfort she had missed every second she'd been gone. And as she placed her suitcase by the couch, the same couch she had slept on her first night there, she realized she had no intention of ever packing it again. The joke that began everything had become the truth she chose with her whole heart. She wasn't moving in temporarily. She was coming home.
If you're into stories filled with emotion, twists, and moments that stay with you, make sure you follow Drew Daily Stories. New chapters drop all the time. Don't miss the next one.